I normally start it as my podcast, but today we're at your stream, so I'm gonna skip all the technicalities. I'm just
I'm
happy
feel
to,
free to
anyways.
do any of that you want to do. Like,
Yeah, that's all fine. That's all fine. I
okay.
mean, the point is when I do my guest presentations, I try to focus on the guest. Weirdly, so let's focus on you. As you can see, I picked a card for the art that you might have personal connection with, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the art for moderation, which is a twist on a design that I submitted before I was at Wizards working on Modern Horizons 2.
Yeah, I do remember it. It was the same episode when you were complaining about companion, quite rightfully so. I mean, it's great for limited, don't get me wrong, it's just not suitable for constructed.
Yeah, I wish it had been able to be closer to my original submission, which cost 2 mana instead of 3, but people started to have some concerns about it. I
I
think
think that
so. Yeah, I think
yes,
my original was actually like instead of recycle, it was just Howling Mine. It was just 2 mana. You draw an extra card a turn, and you can only play once a turn.
okay, well they didn't want that to they anyway. So basically what happens is this presentation is about to try to get some data that maybe will be surprising for you and maybe will be surprising for people that watch your stream. So I was always wondering, what do you hope for getting from your own data? Because I do analysis for 17 Lens quite a lot, and most of the time it's based on a large group of diverse players, and sometimes the top grinders are complaining that, well, but I draft differently, and that data doesn't tell me much, even though it should, because the correlation between top players and lower win rate players is quite strong. But what do you expect from looking at your own data?
Well, so I mean, obviously, I'm already pretty much on board with the data is valuable and tells you real things. So, and I didn't really know exactly what kinds of things you would be looking at. So I guess I was mostly just like, all right, well, I'm I'm interested in hearing whatever you happen to have noticed, rather than like I have specific questions. Um, I guess I would be curious about like some of the stuff, is just like already available. Like I can already see which cards I value more highly than other people and stuff like that. But more like big picture stuff, like um, do my games last longer than normal games or something would be kind of interesting. Um,
There's going to be a spin on that. I mean, I
sure.
didn't look at comparing you with the general populations, because that's a lot of work, to be fair. And
Sure.
um, I went strictly with your own data, but I will look at the game length. Actually, I never did for anyone before, but I thought, oh, for some black, I'm going to look at the win rates depending on the game length. Yes, I will.
Okay. Um,
Right. So, so basically, let's go through what I did. I looked at your drafts from 22nd of November, 16th of January, everything that was logged in 17 lands.
okay.
It was just 34 drafts. I was expecting maybe more. That was my first surprise. But maybe
Right.
you don't log every single game, and I know that you play a lot of games by teaching other people, so it's on
Yeah, no,
their
I
account and it
actually,
doesn't.
I do. Um, I think 17 Lands probably has all of my arena games. I have also played this in paper some, but yeah, because I don't really play arena unless I'm streaming. So there are definitely a lot of people who have way more games played than
Oh
than
yeah,
I do.
no.
So.
Last time I did it for Florida Man, and he had like 175 drafts
Right.
in Dominaria United. That was like, wow, that's a big chunk.
Yeah.
But yeah, 226 games. So you have to keep in mind that those sample sizes are small, and
Right.
there will be large variance there. So lots of this data, you can't like trust it like, oh yeah, this is written in stone. You have to approach it slightly more casual in terms of data analysis, but I
Mhm.
think it will still show some interesting things about you. I have logged around 1500 cards that you drafted. Your win rate is neat 69%. You've drawn 4,323 cards exactly, and I calculated roughly that's 9 kilos of paper that you lifted virtually.
All right.
Um, and as I approach this personal analysis, I always do similar things. It's I first look at the draft portion. I look at the cards that you drafted the most. I looked at the cards that made the deck the most, and I look at the ratios of that. I look at the cards that you almost always pick when you see them,
Right.
and I look slightly at the percentage of the time that you played your first pick in the draft.
I would guess that I'm above average on that one because I tend to like.
You'll have a chance because you will guess at every stage. Don't worry,
All
but
right.
yes, you're right. You draft slightly more than you play your first pick slightly more. That's a spoiler for the next part.
Right.
Um, so what? Okay, which cards do you think you drafted the most? Because you have only 34 drafts. I only focused on the commons here
Okay.
because uncommons just like so much variance in that kind of small
So
data.
this, I mean, I know exactly where to look it up on 17 lands, but I haven't. I'm guessing Sentinel Stalwart, Machine Over Matter, Night Stone's Animation, and Energy Refractor, and Evolving
Okay,
Wilds would be like 5 of
wow.
the top 7.
You do think about what you're doing, don't you? That there's your sit in the stalwart, there's your Maestro
Oh, I got
animation,
about
there's
Gix's Caress. Yeah.
there is the Gixis Karas. But you also see Falagi Archaeologist,
Well,
Machine of Matter
I
is
will
there.
say I said that I was naming 5 of 7, and I did exactly that.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, you nailed it. I think that I think that this sort of plays into your play style as well. I mean,
Yeah,
I
definitely.
can imagine you as a person that drafts Citadel Stalwart decks, and if you don't have Citadel Stalwarts, you will just do some kind of energy refractor, Meister animation shenanigans, and actually refractor probably plays in both the builds with the Stalwart and the animation. Is
Yeah.
that right assessment?
Yep.
So yeah, well, that went pretty quick and pretty well. Let's see if you can actually I can catch you out on some other statistics. So which cards, when you drafted them, almost always made the deck, and that has to be drafted 10 times more or more only, and it will be probably mainly commons, but there might be some uncommons in there as well.
Yeah. So,
Maybe even some rares actually.
uh, Energy Refractor. Um, let's see. It's gonna be like most prototype creatures. It's not gonna be Stalwart. It's not gonna be Gix's Cress. Um, I don't think I often pivot away from Lightstone's animation, so it might be that. Um,
I know the data, so I'm smiling.
right. It's like it's weird in this set because it seems like it's just all the colorless cards. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it.
It's fine. That like 2-3 guesses is probably good because it sets you up and gives you some
Right,
kind of your own evaluation. We can go later to the actual details of it. You had at
right.
least 8 cards that you played every single time that you drafted, and that's Levitating Statue, Obliterating Bolt, Third Python Iconoclast, Combat Thresher, Overwhelming Remorse, Skyfisher Spider, Evolving Wilds, and Energy Refractor. Now,
Yeah,
keep in mind that Energy Refractor was the most drafted of those,
right.
basically. Like Levitating Statue, you probably had like 8 of them. 10 times you drafted, or 11 maybe. And all
Yeah,
the other cards sort of. I think Skyfisher Spider, you drafted 15 times, you played 15 times.
right. Okay,
Evolving
so
Wilds, I think it's around 20 times that you drafted it.
right. So ignoring Evolving Wilds, which is obviously a card I'm always gonna play. I did name the top 2 commons, including Getting Might Sense Animation, even though it's colored. So I feel pretty good about my answers there. And then moving
Yeah. I
on to just
think
like
my Steel Animation, you drafted, if I remember correctly, like 44 times and you played it 42 times or something.
right,
And Rager was like 19 times drafted, 18 times played, or something like that.
right.
So yeah, I mean, I assume that none of those cards really surprises you in there. It's all
I mean I'm kind of disappointed with myself for presumably the like one time I didn't play Mission Research Desk.
yeah. I think it was exactly one time that you didn't play it, and probably you weren't. You just couldn't probably splash red. I guess
Right.
that might have
I
been.
hope either I was wrong or I had literally no way to make red mana.
Yeah, probably. That's my guess because I also know that red was the color that you were not really keen on in this format,
Sure.
despite Obliterating Bolt being in here in third part Iconoclast. being here. I think it was the
Yeah,
caller
I
who
mean, it's
played
just
the
a bunch
least.
of, like, commons or uncommons I think are great. I'm gonna find a way to get them in all my decks, basically.
Well, we'll see about the win rates of those. That will come at some stage.
Yeah.
So okay, which cards that you drafted never made your deck? And I'm looking at the top cards that you did draft, but you never put in your deck.
What do I take frequently but have never played?
I mean, frequently-ish.
Right, of course.
Got him.
Well, it's hard to think of the ones you don't play.
I know, that's why I put that category every single time.
Maybe like Mishra's Onslaught.
Okay, well, we'll stop at the Mishra's Onslaught. I actually don't remember that one because I was doing it quite late yesterday night, but there we go.
Oh,
I mean,
I've played Union now.
not now, but that doesn't count. I didn't have the data from now. We have Dredging Claw, Fog of War, Ashland's Intervention, Shootdown, and Swiftgear Drake. I mean, that's obviously cards that are you pick them because they are deep on the wheel. I think that
It's I mean it's interesting that I've never played Third Path or Shootdown. I've certainly played Shootdown I've certainly sided Shootdown, like I have cast Shootdown on Arena, but it
it
might have
must have
only
been in
been in
best of
best
three.
of
This
three.
is I
Yeah,
only got the best of one data
yeah,
because you had very little best of three games, and I just didn't want to
right,
confuse the data set by adding a second format, basically.
right.
But yeah, I was surprised by Shootdown. Is that something that
I mean, it's
you
not a
think that it's
coincidence that I've ever played it. Like, I do like it less than other people. I'm always low on sorcery speed removal, and this is like narrow, expensive sorcery speed removal. Like it's the kind of card where people are like, "Your deck doesn't have any removal. You're gonna play shoot in," and I'm like, "I'd rather just not have removal."
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, I think I played it a couple of times, but it was never impressive, to be fair. So
Mm-hmm.
you might be onto something, you know? Okay, this is a slightly different approach because I told you which cards you pick, but now we're looking at how many times did you see a card and how many times did you pick them, and basically shows you what are your strong preferences about cards, the cards that you almost always pick when you see them, rather than
Right,
almost always play them when you draft them.
right. I mean, so it's gonna be a lot of the same cards that I have drafted the most, because there's strong correlation here. I don't think I pass a lot of like path iconoclasts. I don't pass a lot of um, combat threshers, Night Sins animation, Sentinel stalwarts, Sentinel more than the others because sometimes I try to will it and sometimes I'm not green. Um,
Yeah, I'm not sure if like Iconoclast and Combat Thresher will make the 15 times seen aspect of it. So
right.
I'm
Oh,
not
Skyfisher
100%.
Spider. I guess I know will. I think you said I
Oh yeah,
drafted
yeah,
it 15
yeah.
times.
That was 15 times for sure. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember.
yeah.
Okay, let's look. Well, there you go, Skyfisher Spider. There is the Combat Thresher. There's
Oh,
the
I
Stalwart. There is
forgot
the Refractor.
Refractor,
There's the
but
Iconoclast. There is the
yeah.
animation. Okay, Obliterating
Yeah.
the Void. Mishra's Research
Basically all the
Desk.
same cards.
I was the only thing that surprised me here really was the Elsewhere Flask. I
Sure,
mean,
I mean it's
I
energy refractor light.
yeah, no, I do know that, but I just like think very often I see Elsewhere Flask, and it's like maybe the one that I least prioritize from all those cheap cantripping artifacts, and
Mhm.
you seem to be picking it pretty highly because 46% of the time you saw it, you picked it, and
Right.
like pick one. I usually will find something better to pick than Elsewhere Flask.
I would guess that I saw it, passed a lot more than I opened it because it goes relatively late, so you're
Yeah,
more
okay,
likely
yeah,
to see it out of
it
someone
might be
else's
that
deck.
you picked it a lot in the 5th to 7th pick kind of slot.
Right,
And
exactly.
of course, if it wheels, it also counted that you picked it, sort
Right.
of.
Sure.
But I already can see that you're the person. Normally people find something surprising, but you just don't. You just know what you're doing. That's very
I mean,
annoying
I
for
know what
me.
I'm doing, and I like pay attention to the data in like both mine and in the format in general. Like I think I mean because I think part of it is just having like a podcast forces me to like pay a lot of attention to what I'm doing and be really analytical about stuff so that I can extract it and explain what's going on.
All right. So I have prepared a game, and that is Card X or Wasteful Harvest. Which card did you pick more frequently when you saw it?
Card X.
And this is something. We have 5 cards that you can
Sure.
basically pick, and you have to go. I picked it more frequently or less frequently than
Right.
Wasteful Harvest in terms of percentage.
Sure.
So the first one is Wasteful Harvest versus Disenchant.
Okay, this one's interesting. I mean,
obviously, I picked them all that are quite close, so
no, I mean, I would
slightly
assume
tilts the table in my favor there.
Right, I'm thinking about why, like, what would have to happen for it to not be Disenchant? Because, like, obviously Disenchant's better, and I would take it more than I would take Wasteful Harvest. But the question is, of the time I'm seeing Disenchant, it's more likely that it's there early in the pack, and I'm not likely to take it early. And so, like, if I never see Disenchant on the wheel, then I would never take Disenchant. Whereas if I see Wasteful Harvest late, like with 1 card in the pack, I'm taking it. So I'm never getting forced to take a Disenchant where I'm forced to take a Wasteful Harvest. The question is, do I value Disenchant lower enough than other people?
That is exactly the whole point of the game.
Right.
We'll go there in a second.
Disenchant does seem like something I value significantly lower than other people, but is it enough for her? I'm gonna go with yes. I'm gonna guess Wasteful Harvest.
It was Disenchant. You picked Wasteful Harvest 12.5% of the time you see it, and Disenchant actually around 14%.
Okay.
So 0-1. Let's go. Epic Confrontation.
Oh, God. This is the same situation where I know that I value it less than other people. But
I know. I looked at your data. I know exactly where I'm there.
I'm green reasonably often, which means that I'm going to want it a tiny bit more than I otherwise would. All right, I'm going to guess Epic Confrontation over Wasteful Harvest.
11.7. Yes, I'm getting there. Finally, I got you on something. Okay, Aeronaut Cavalry.
Oh, man. All right, again, I'm going to go Wasteful Harvest.
This time you're right. It's only 10% of the time you see Aeronaut Cavalry, you actually pick it, and it's 12.5% for Wasteful Harvest. Mistress Juggernaut.
I'm going to go Juggernaut. I kind of like Juggernaut.
Good. You did well there. It's 15.1%. That was actually probably the biggest swing from the average that you did. And we have the last one, Prison Sentence.
I'm going to guess Wasteful Harvest here.
Oh, damn it, you're so right. It's like only 7.5% of the time you pick Prison Sentence.
Yeah.
We're going to come back to the discussion about Prison Sentence at some stage, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So you went 3-2. That's fine. You win. I concede. But I got you twice, which I will always cherish in my heart. Now, what was the point of this game? I mean, because the game is it has a point. It's not a pointless game. Yeah. So the least drafted cards, when you look at it, the cards that you never pick are the ones where you disagree with the rest of the Magic world the most. Because if you would imagine the worst card ever, and this is the worst card that I made, like it costs 12 mana, and if you draft it, you lose the next 3 matches. Obviously, you don't want to draft it, because if you draft it, you lose the next 3 matches. You are going to pick it exactly 12.5% of the time, because if you just get it as the last card in the pack, you're going to pick it because you're forced to do that. Right. That's why I think Wasteful Harvest is exactly 12.5% of the pick rate, because you're going to pick it when you're forced to it. And, sometimes maybe you'll pick it over something like as the second to last pick, but that would be around 12.5%. Right. Now, if you pick a card 0% of the time, it means that other people pick it before you're forced to draft it as the last card. And therefore, you pick it 0% of the times you see it, because community values it, but you just don't want to have it. So that brings us to the next category, which cards you picked almost never. And I'm talking cards that you've seen, but you never picked them, and before they wheeled, the rest of the community picked them.
Right. So you want me to guess here?
Yeah.
I assume we're ignoring rares. It's like I have to have seen it.
No, it must have seen it like at least 15 times, I think, in this case as well. It's the same kind of.
Which cards do I really not value? Oh, so I don't pick it never, but I'm guessing Power Stone Fracture. Um, what are some others that?
Oh, just two, three guesses will be
Yeah,
just
but
great.
to get at least one more Power Stone Fracture.
Yeah. And I think that there are some cards that you have literally picked never.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. Um, my really early draft might throw this off, but I'll say Kolos Rock.
Okay, let's take a look at the data.
Phalanx Vanguard.
That's the cards that you never picked, like
Right.
literally never. We have the Phalanx Vanguard. 64 times you've seen it and you never were tempted, and that was pretty shocking to me.
Yeah.
There's Mishra, Battlefield Butcher, Involuntary Cooldown, Monastery Swift Spear, Burnish Heart, Sigil of Valor, Take Flight, Alloy Animus. Most of them uncommons, and Vanguard being a common. I think one card that I thought was quite surprising of the cards that you actually picked a couple of times, but you've seen them way more, was the Carrion Locust, I think, the 2/1 flyer that you've
Oh,
seen 94 times and picked once,
yeah,
I
that
think.
doesn't surprise me. I mean, I've always hated Windrake, and that's a bad one.
Okay, well, there you go. I mean, any of those cards sort of surprise you, or you just like, you know exactly
Uh,
that you don't value them?
no, none of those are surprising.
Because for me, I think that the only card in here that I was slightly surprised is the involuntary cooldown. I thought, and actually Alloy Animus, I thought that you might be tempted to pick once or
I
twice.
tried Ally Animus early in the format and discovered that like the decks that use it well aren't looking to like convert their mana into damage or like hold up mana to block. Like the when I'm making a bunch of power stones and drafting around having a good way to use them, and Ally Animus just ends up being like the worst way to use them.
And the cooldown?
Uh, I mean, cooldown, you have to be like actively trying to end a game, which, as all of my viewers know, is not me.
Okay, yeah, well, that makes a bit of sense. And Phalanx Vanguard, actually, why not? Because I found this card to be pretty serviceable in aggro decks, but I guess that the answer will be you just don't play aggro decks.
Yep.
There we go.
Real simple.
So, average 17 land user plays their first pick 80% of the time. Where do you think you land in that statistic?
90. 90 what? 92%.
That's actually not that aggressive. I think that it's only 84.8.
Okay.
And that compares to the average of around 80% from the arena users. And the weird part is that there is this, I always find this data slightly mind-boggling, that people that have 0 wins in their draft never play their first pick for some reason. But I think that this because of concession and resigning from a draft, basically. That.
Okay.
But it's such a weird result, and it's
Right, right.
reproducible
No, you're
across
probably
different
right. That there's
formats.
people who just like draft, hate their deck, and draft immediately, and so they don't play anything.
God, the number of trophies I got from decks that I hated immediately when I drafted them is
Yeah, I'm certainly
shocking.
not someone who ever does that, but it is the only way I can account for like the huge jump there.
Yeah, no, I mean the disparity between the 0 wins and the 1 win is just too big to be.
Right.
I could imagine if it's slightly increased over time, maybe that would be something to do with the deck. But like that, you just like think it's just a weird quirk of how Arena is operating.
Yeah, given how close all of these numbers are and how much they kind of, wiggle as opposed to like having any real trajectory, it makes me think that this is not very informative. Like there's not much correlation here.
I mean, it does inform you a bit about how many people resign, and that's
Yes.
something to know. Actually, that's quite a lot of people just chuck their
Well,
deck
it
in the
doesn't
bin and
tell
move
you
on.
how many, it tells you what portion of people who get no wins resigned, which is a pretty high portion.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but since I do know how many
Right. Sure.
decks
Sure. You
have
can see
0
where
wins, I
the
can sort of calculate that, and it will be something.
right.
Um, okay, that's the end of the draft portion. Now we can look at the gameplay.
Nice.
So we're going to look at your win rate and how did it change over time. Look at the color preferences that you had over the format. Look at your color win rates, and because the sample size was so small, I looked at the number of colors played rather than which color combinations you were
Okay.
keen on playing.
Yeah.
Especially that you definitely didn't stick to the two color archetypes in this format.
Right.
And then we're looking at the card win rates. And as a bonus, I made also the game length statistic for you because I thought that you might find it interesting.
Right. I'm guessing my win rate over time has improved.
We'll see that. So
Sure.
basically, to do that, just explain it to people that don't know what running average is. But because the games are 0 or 1, it's a win or loss. Plotting the games is just not very informative. So I use the strategy called running average, which means I take a bunch of games, I count the average win rate for those games, and then I move it one step, recalculate the win rate, move it one step, recalculate the win rate, and I go like all across your gameplay, and I recalculate win rate for each of those. I did for 50 game slots basically. Here in the example, I show a 10 game kind of slot. And then I plot them on the graph. So basically, from this kind of messy graph, when you plot the running average, you get something much more coherent. And then you can follow how your win rate trajectory looked over the format.
Okay.
So I took the window of 50 games in your case because you played roughly 250. So we have like some points in there. So how did your confidence in play develop during the format? What do you think your winning years period in the format was?
Um.
Are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. I'm thinking.
Okay.
Uh.
I
I.
can't see anything. I just see the
Yeah.
slides.
Yeah.
So
Sure. 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 So, I mean, I usually felt pretty confident. I definitely had some like strategic pivots that were, you know, hard to pin down as to like the extent to which it was um reacting to like changes in the metagame versus like understanding stuff I didn't understand before. Um like early I was only winning with like multicolor green black decks, and then I like figured out the stalwart stuff, and then I figured the blue stuff, and then kind of
oh,
stuck with
we're going to talk about colors
right, right. No,
just
I
one slide
understand.
later. But
But as far as like which of those eras was winningest, I would say like stalwart to blue. Um, so I'm supposed to answer this in terms of like which
time,
group
I
of
guess,
50.
we will have it on plotted
Yeah,
in
I don't
time.
know. I'll guess like middle-ish, early middle.
Okay, well let's look at your winner. Obviously, it's high, but I think that you started okay, and then you had this dip like around early December when you had the lowest win rates. You dropped down as low as 58% win rate, shocking, over 50 games.
Okay.
And then you slowly build up, and I think that the end period, like after Christmas, the beginning of the year was like the highest win rate you got. So it was like
Okay.
across 50 games, you went up to 78% win rate, which is
So my first thought was actually right. It basically improved over time.
yeah, that was right. I was waiting for you to repeat it, but you got doubt, and I'm
Well,
winning this one.
I also wasn't sure what was going on with the like, previous graph that you showed, where it looked like it was down toward the end, but I didn't know what that was a graph of exactly. So
No, that
I
was
was
just
like,
random numbers. Yeah, that was
oh,
just
okay. I was like, all right, got it. So that kind of threw me off, but
but yeah, I mean, you clearly like it's actually astonishing how much your win rate improved at the January period. It might be also something to do with the fact that there was a new season starting and you went down to Platinum Diamond.
Oh, sure.
And that might have improved the win rate, while at the end of December you were playing mainly in Mythic. I guess that there is something to
Right, but
do
I mean,
that,
of course, all of the other mythics also dropped down to
Oh,
Platinum
yeah,
Diamond
yeah.
at that point, but yeah. But then also, like, at the beginning of the season, at the beginning of January, I was playing the decathlon stuff.
Yeah,
So that,
exactly.
like, gave other people a chance to go higher, and then I started playing while I'm, like, kind of low ranked relatively, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't try to be Mythic on the 3rd of January or something,
Right.
like some people do. Um, so yeah, that's the thing. Here is my Ristic Studies piece. It's like Picasso had his periods, the blue period and the rose period. Which color combinations you think you played differentially um, as the format progressed? And you gave part of that answer already. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, like I said, it started kind of uh, green black, uh, like green black, blue maybe, and then kind of transitioned into messier green slash whatever, and then transitioned into like more blue, and then like red with the blue after like more blue, and then kind of like smoothed out into a random mix of green and or blue based with other stuff.
I think are you peeking in
Nope.
my slides? I didn't give you the link to the presentation. So how I calculated it is I basically looked at the percentage of the time you played a color X as your one of your main colors according to 17 lands data. So basically, it had to be like 3 or more spells in the deck of that color and some lands that can produce that mana. So I said you started quite high on green. Then you have this kind of this part is the green black stage. When you see from behind the green, you can see the,
Okay.
the the black is quite high. So that was definitely the green black. Then the blue reappeared, and you play Saltai quite a lot. That was also like the lowest time for playing red in your 17 lands data at least. Then this is the sort of period when you played like lots of things, but mainly Saltai colors still at that time. Here you played black quite a lot, and I don't think that you realized that there was this moment
Okay.
when you played quite a lot of black.
Yeah.
And white is here, but it's hidden under. It's around 40% as well, so it's like
Okay.
somewhere here. And then towards the end of that data period, you actually had quite a lot of white being played, and black is still somewhere here.
Okay.
So looking across all the format, 60% of your decks had blue, green, or black um, as main colors. And then you had like 40% white and only 30%, 33% red. So red was definitely the color that you played the least as a main color in this whole
Right.
format, basically.
Yeah.
Does it make
See
sense?
also magic.
Deb?
I said see also magic. Like as a
Mm.
whole, I think I'm a little bit less likely to play red.
Yeah, I'm definitely much more on the porous side of the spectrum because I like turning creatures sideways and not having decisions. Yeah, that's
Sure.
that's
Yeah.
much easier. So here are the two graphs sort of put together on top of each other,
Oh,
so
okay.
you can
Cool.
see where you can.
It looks like the black period was a good period.
The black period is when you moved to the high win rate, and then you continued it also when you switched from black at this stage of late format. I think that the first time that you discovered blue was the time when you saw some kind of a hit in the win rate when you stopped playing green on high level and started playing Demir. I think especially you this moment you played Demir decks because I looked at the win rates of the colors, just that sample sizes were pretty small. And I think that Demir decks you did pretty badly with in terms of like win rate. You had like maybe 52% win rate with Demir decks, and you
Right.
played quite a lot of them, I think, in that period, and
Right.
that reflected the.
Yeah. So it's interesting that kind of like I think blue and black both worked out well for me, but like blue black's not very good.
Or at least not the builds that you're trying. And I think
Sure.
that when we look at the individual card win rates, you will see exactly which cards were the underperformers,
Okay.
with the caveat that sample sizes are quite small for those win rates.
Sure.
But it's still, I mean, you can draw some conclusions. You just shouldn't be too stuck with them, because they might be an artifact of data and small
Right.
sample size. So how many colors should you play to be the most successful in this game? I basically looked at monocolor decks, two color decks, three color decks, four color decks, and five color decks that you played, and calculated win rates of those, because there I had at least some kind
Right.
of sample size.
And I assume you mean specifically me, as opposed to like.
Yeah,
I know that in
specifically.
aggregate you should play too.
Yeah, yeah.
For me, I'll guess 3.
Okay. So, okay, let's look at the data, because there's no point in speculating there. This is the win rates of the colors, but the red ones are only looking at the primary colors of the deck, and the blue one is looking also at how many colors you splash. So, for example, you have 66% win rate of monocolor decks, but they include decks with splash, and you have 78% win rate with monocolor decks that don't have any splash.
Okay.
These are strictly monocolor
So
decks.
hard
It's of course,
monocolor did best by a significant margin.
but you played very few of those as well.
Right.
So I mean,
Yep.
that there's this
Right.
problem.
And I mean, well, so I mean, that's the thing is like the issue that you run into always with number of colors is the more open your colors are, the more likely you are to be mono, the better your seed is. Basically, the more open, the fewer colors you're going to be, the better your seed is. So like, there's this danger of being like, oh,
And yeah,
you
yeah,
should
and I
try to
think
play
that
one. Yeah.
the monocolor decks in question are the ones that you were talking about in one of your podcasts, the mono blue with
Yep.
Might animation, that you basically figured out on your own, and it seemed to be a pretty successful build. That I think why you made the episode on that, because it
Yep.
was quite successful.
Right.
But I mean, there's no clear pattern in there. You have a pretty decent win rates between two color decks and four color decks. There is no big issue of one wins significantly less, and you have even pretty decent win rates with five color decks. When that of course includes splashing, but I mean probably it was like three color decks with two splashes, or four color decks with
Right. Right.
splashed color. So basically, in this format for you, full range was available, and I think that's what made Pro a sort of interesting format, because it was
Yeah.
sneakily multicolor, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of. A little
Artifacts, yeah.
sneaky.
I mean,
I mean, I think for people who have played a lot of artifact sets previously, it was probably less sneaky. Because, like, when a lot of the cards are artifacts, knowing that you're going to be able to cast some portion of your spells every game, regardless of your color situation, is, like, really valuable to multi-codex being able to function. And so, I mean, like, this goes back to, like, toward the end of drafting original Mirrodin, I was drafting, like, 5-color, and my colors were defined by which artifact ones I got past, and I was just trying to not take any cards that cost me the same pip. And, like, my deck was most artifacts.
yeah, good times. I was mainly drafting million frogmites and something.
Right.
But yeah, but how did it impact your pick order, knowing that the format is like this? Because I think that this is the important thing to know on your philosophy of drafting.
Well, I mean, I think that, like, a lot of what we see is just the preference for cards that let you splash more. Like taking Evolving Wild, Sentinel Stalwart, and Energy Refractor really highly, and just always playing them and taking them most of the time that I see them. And then like using that color flexibility to highly prioritize like prototype cards like Combat Thresher, and then playing it as some decks will be able to cast it for 3 mana a lot of the time. Some decks will only be able to cast it for 3 mana some of the time, but I'm satisfied with the card either way.
Yeah, 3/3 double striker is usually useful later in the game.
Right. Well, and the draw card being the biggest part of
Hmm.
it. um, Yeah,
And
so I think, that's basically it, is just like know that I can get away with this kind of thing. And so uh, like don't abandon my first pick because I can probably find a way to play it even if that color's cut, stuff like that.
yeah, I think that yeah. Would you agree this is sort of format fixing utility creatures, like not only the prototype creatures, but also the
The
cohorts, the
unearthed.
scrap, yeah,
Yeah,
scraps, the unearthed guys. Yeah, I mean they were amazing in that format. And if
right,
you pick like four of them in the first pack, and then you just had some fixing, you could play all of them easily,
right.
and your deck built itself because they were also good.
Right. And then you can also like more highly prioritize the like military guys.
Mm. And of course, you get some bombs because you're open to all colors, so you'll get bombs in pack 2 and pack 3.
Right.
Right, let's move on. Um, we move to the card win rates, and again, minimum of 15 games. We're going to look at games played win rate and games in hand win rate. So basically, which cards were in your good decks and which cards were good when you drew them, sort of two different look. And we're also going to look at the cards that did poorly when they were in your deck and did poorly when you drew them. And maybe that's what I usually found is that this is the most illuminating part of the data analysis for the individual person, because you see the win rates of the cards, but you don't see your own win rates. And
Right.
you can have like an impression, and I'm pretty sure you have a better impression than anyone else I questioned because you actually think about those things quite hard. But I hope to see a couple of surprises myself in
Yeah.
that data set. So first, what do you think that were your top games played cards? So which cards were in the decks that you did best, and keeping in mind that you need to play 15 games with them?
Might Stone's animation, um, third Path Iconoclast. It had 15 games with it. Um, Probably Stalwart.
Okay,
Um,
well,
yeah.
that's three. Yeah, that's enough. We can think, but we can also discuss them when you see them. Prison sentence was your top. The card that you frown upon. Prison sentence, 93% win rate. Obviously, the sample size there was pretty small. It was whatever,
Right.
but you won almost every single game that you had it in your deck, except for one, I think.
That's pretty funny.
Maybe there is something with them. I mean, obviously, like a card like Flow of Knowledge, you probably played it in the mono blue decks. Therefore, it was quite a high win rate because those mono blue decks, we know that you did very well with. We have the data of you doing 78% win rate on average with mono blue decks. And I
Well,
guess
I'm
that the
pretty
one
lucky
with
to
Flow
have
of
gotten to play
Knowledge,
15 games as Siege Veteran.
yeah. Or, I mean, is it luck? If you're open to every color, every time you see a
Sure.
siege veteran, you pick it. That's just it. I mean, maybe there was some variance that you saw it maybe three times more than normally, and you played lots of games because you win lots of games. You know, it's just
Right.
three drafts and you do go
Sure, sure.
six,
Yeah.
three, whatever, and you have the 15 games. So that's fine. Static Net is on the list. I'm sure that you love Static Net and you hate Prison Sentence. Not that big a difference between them in terms of win rate.
Hmm.
Recommission, another card that you didn't play super hard, but pretty good win rate because I assume that you picked it in decks that was really good. What do
Yeah.
you think about it? Any of those cards surprise you?
Um,
Disenchant.
well, so I mean, like, a lot of it is, I don't play white very often. And, like, we see Siege Veteran on this list. And so, some of this is like, how many of these other white cards are being held up by the Siege Veteran? Um,
It might be that the siege veteran was held up by the prison sentence. You never
it
know.
might be.
I
um,
mean, I'm pretty sure that there's a link between recommission and siege veteran because I see you as a
right,
person that, oh, I have a siege veteran. I'll just play recommission because of that.
right. Um,
How do you think Howling Mine? Because that was interesting. You seem to be a big fan of Howling Mine in this format.
well, I only play it with Stalwarts.
Oh, obviously, but But you
And
picked it quite highly, and you played quite. I was shocking how many games with Howling Mine you played. It was like 26 or something.
well, I always try to have stalwarts, and they're great together.
uh, Gixian Infiltrator, on the other hand, that seems like nothing that you were doing that much in the
Yeah, the
format.
Thraxidemon Gixian Infiltrator part of this is really surprising. Um, yeah, it's weird that I like won that much for Thraxidemon and have played it very few times, and um, I generally think it was like kind of slow for the format, which is a little weird given that I'm pretty into slow, but yeah.
Yeah, again, these cards, because it's games played, the signal of the card itself is much lower than of
Right.
the deck that they were in. It's just maybe interesting to see those data and then maybe think about were there builds that you maybe missed when you were playing them, because you obviously, I mean, I know that you draft what you want and you play what you really feel strongly that you want to be playing, apart from the fact that are winning, and the wins come quite naturally. But maybe there were other like grindy kind of black red builds that you didn't explore enough in the format. Don't you think about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so I know that black red specifically was like very overdrafted. Like it's
That's true.
the um deck that has been drafted the most, but has only like the third highest win rate or something.
Even lower, I
And it's
think.
oh, it might be lower. I know that it's significantly far from the top in terms of win
Yeah,
rate
yeah, yeah.
and significantly far from second in terms of being drafted appreciably more.
Yeah, I did that data 3 weeks ago, and I think it was like fifth even, and then it was way more. I
Yeah,
mean, that's what put me off the deck myself, because I knew that there's a good chance that people are going to
right.
fight
I
over
think it's
it
just a
way too
matter
high.
of like people really highly prioritizing the common removal, and then like that, just putting them in black red, even though like they're overrating those cards and then kind of getting attached to it.
If you like common removal, just pick Citadel Stalwarts. That's easy. Okay, Pristine Talisman is also the weird one, but okay, these data sample this sample sizes are pretty low,
Yeah,
so
Talisman is also
um,
is definitely just weird. I've played with it a little.
okay, but let's look at this is the which were the cards you played with worst win rate in games played, obviously.
Right. I kind of wonder if the answer is Scrapwork Rager. Um,
Ooh, good one.
because I think that like if there was a time where I was doing badly with blue black, I think that that's part of it. Is that my blue black decks are a little too like value focused and not quite tempo focused enough relative to how the deck wants to be in the format.
Any other card you think?
Uh, I'm just gonna leave it at that one.
Okay. Cassia's Onulet is the winner, but I was waiting for you to say Trench Stalker, because that
Right.
card was definitely part of those blue black
Mm-hmm.
decks. I mean, I was surprised by a couple of them. Mishra's Bubble was a weird one. Obviously, it's 61% still, but that's pretty low. Stern Lesson, well, I guess after today it's going to be slightly higher. Um, I mean, these are quite obvious. The Cradle Clear Cutter and the Rust Goliath. I assume, at some stage were trying to play the big things, and it didn't work so well.
Yeah, and I think that both of those cards, I think I mostly played like in the first week of the format or something.
Mm.
Um,
Argothian Sprite and Gaia's Gift. Actually, Gaia's Gift and Lauren's Escape. Both of those cards, I guess they just don't suit your gameplay style.
yeah, it's interesting because like those are cards that I probably underplay relative to like their win rates for other people. Um, but
But
it
other people play aggro.
right.
So yeah, I think that Tomaku Scrapsmith is another one that I think that you said that the card is not as bad in one of the podcasts, if I remember correctly, and that you actually don't mind it in some decks, but it didn't perform too well in the decks that you played it in.
Yeah, I don't remember where I said that. It's hard to make it functional. It's
Yeah.
not very good.
Excavation.
I'm actually surprised by how high Great Desert Prospector's win rate is.
Well, because probably you tried to meme with it, didn't you?
Well, I mean, I just say I only played it if it had, real potential. I don't know how different that is from memeing with it.
But yeah, I mean, at 62%, you can't really, I can't really complain as it's above my win rate for the format. So there we go. But these are your lowest cards. I mean, as you can see, the difference is around 13%. There is a bunch of cards in the middle which are quite flat on their win rate. So everything else fits in that. And you have to keep in mind that Great Desert Prospector might have been not drawn only a few times in the games that
Sure, right. This is games played,
it's
not game
won.
in hand.
They were like good decks that had a Prospector in it, and maybe the Prospector didn't play a big role.
Right.
So we can look now at the actual data where there is going to be much more impact of the card. And I'm still looking at 15, so it has to be drawn 15 times, which means most of those cards probably will not will not be
Right.
drawn enough to be in that. I think that it's around half of the cards on those lists are also on these lists, and not necessarily in the top win rate or bottom win rate. So they might be somewhere in the middle there still
Right.
as well. So what do you think? Game in hand, which cards were the most successful for you?
I still like, some of the cards that I guessed before that didn't show up. Like Extends Animation, Third Path, maybe Machine Over Matter.
Okay, let's look at it. Haywire Might was your highest win rate game in hand, weirdly.
Yeah.
There we have Teething Wormlet.
That card's great.
I know it's great, but A, you drew it a lot, and B, you never lost when you drew it. You see the Mishra's Bauble, which was in the low win rate cards, I think, in the games played. When you draw it, it's like a different story.
Okay.
Howling Mine is there again, which
It's
is
weird to
not
think that
surprising.
the Bauble decks were particularly bad decks. Like, oh yeah, you don't want to draft a deck that wants Bauble.
Yeah, I guess that you put Bubble in every deck, but I think
Right.
that drawing it is just putting you so much ahead in the game because you usually probably had good synergies with them because like Bubble with the Stalwart makes you
Mm-hmm.
play 3 drops on turn 2. Bubble with Iconoclast, we saw that
Yeah.
an hour ago or so. What kind of things it can do, and I mean this is like probably the nice summary of your format here because we see the Teething Wormlet, so high synergy card that plays well with the Mishra's Bubble, with the Howling Mine. Iconoclast plays also great with those Howling Mine, Elsewhere Flask, Levitating Statue, same story here. Urza, I mean, again, we saw what it
So
can
it's
do.
interesting that so Curate's really interesting for one thing. It's also interesting that Might Sense Animation's not actually on here. Um, but yeah, like basically like okay, bunch of good uncommons, rares, sure. But then like looking at the commons, like Strongbolt, Overwhelming Remorse, Curate, Moment of Defiance. So that's a set of commons.
Yeah. Yep, that's the set of commons. Well, I guess uncommons are stronger for a good reason.
Right.
Overwhelming Remorse is a bit of an outlier here as well. I mean, I guess that you splashed it quite a lot.
Uh, yeah, I don't. I feel like I ended up playing it kind of less than I would have thought at the beginning of the format. I know that like my first day playing like sealed in the format, I was like, this card's just ridiculous. It's just like 1 mana exile anything's happening here. And then playing it more, it ended up being like a little clunkier to turn on than it was in my first experiences.
I probably that's one thing I should have done. I should have probably calculated creatures to spell ratios of your deck because I mean I'm pretty sure that you just didn't have enough creatures in your decks to make Overwhelming Remorse useful.
Well, you say that, but I won 83% of 80, almost 84% of the time I drew Overwhelming Remorse. So apparently
You
it's
mean
pretty
in the
useful.
decks that had actually creatures in them?
Maybe.
In both of them?
Um,
Any other surprises on that list for you?
Still Curate.
Still Curate. You still cannot get over how Curate won so many games.
Well, I mean, I know that Curate doesn't have good stats in this format. Um, and I've been like relatively willing to play it, and apparently that's a good choice.
Like, but okay, I mean, of course it doesn't have a good win rate in the format, but think about the decks that you're building, which are sort of toolboxy kind
Yeah,
of
no, I mean, I see the
value-oriented
third
2
path
for 1.
iconoclast levitating statue on that list. I mean,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think I play curate with Thopter Mechanical too.
Yeah, but also, I mean, I would see that, seeing so many cards by a cheap spell that maybe has some other synergies is going to be way more beneficial for you than for an average arena user or average
Oh,
17 lands
sure,
user
sure.
even. It's like, I know that I always look at I didn't look at for the Bro, but I looked at it for DMU. The cards that the top win rate players have a biggest delta between the
Right.
middle, and Impulse was the card in DMU.
Fair
I was
enough.
like, biggest delta, because looking at 4 cards is something completely different for an intermediate player and for the 65% win rate player. And I
Sure.
think Curate is not as good as Impulse, obviously,
No, no,
but
but it's definitely in that direction. They're
exactly.
similar cards.
So that's but I mean, and of course, 82% here, it might mean it's 72 or something because of the variance in small data sets.
Sure, sure.
Let's look at the cards that are not winning even when you drew them. Any guesses there?
I mean, I don't know why Onulet and Trench Stalker wouldn't be near the top of this list.
It might be because they wouldn't have 15 games sample. That's the only reason I would
Right.
guess. If they were not there, I actually don't remember.
Yeah, so I'm gonna guess those, and I'll still guess Rager.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go with the Rager. You have Tomoko Scrapsmith. It's even lower win rate than in the decks it was. So
Well,
there
sure. I
you
mean, that
go.
makes sense. Not good. And drawing
Gaia's
it is worse
Gift
than playing it. Not drawing it. Yeah, Gaia's Gift is surprising.
might
Mine
work, but
Worker is
yeah,
not
you
particularly
have a lower
surprising.
win rate with Gaia's Gift than the average of 17 lands. I think. There's your Rager, by the way. It's definitely there.
Okay. Oh, and I'm right
Cool.
about Epic Competition. That one does not serve me well. Warlord's Lead surprising though. I
But
like
would you
that
guess
card.
Combat Courier, by the way?
Oh wow, I would not.
Would you guess
Um,
Argothian Opportunist?
no, I would not.
Or
I mean,
Branchwood Prowler or Skyfisher Spider? Or Stern Lesson for that.
well, the Skyfisher Spider is particularly funny because I mostly played it early, and like my first 4 or 5 trophies were all Skyfisher Spider decks. Um, so it's like, well, that's weird. It was like the only way I could win when I started playing.
I mean, that was same with me. My first trophies were basically just green black soup with some splashing and Skyfisher Spiders. That was it.
Yeah. So
But I think maybe because you played it every single time that you had it, I think you might have played it also in some decks where they probably shouldn't have been, maybe.
sure.
Is that maybe in that experimental stage when you were weaning off black and playing it in green blue with splashing? Maybe that was not the chassis for it.
Um, I don't think that any of my decks would have been improved by cutting Skyfisher Spider. Um, I mean, I guess I'd set the line at 1 deck or whatever. Um,
I mean, I'm actually quite surprised by some of the green cards on that list, to be fair. Like Opportunist, Branchwood Prowler, I would expect not them to be like the cards
yeah,
that you want to play with. I'm not surprised by Rager. I'm not surprised by Scrapsmith. But
right.
Branchwood Prowler and Opportunists, that's a bit strange. Also, Ichor Wellspring, that's one of those cheap retro artifacts that can draw cards. And I think that it's a bit strange that it's on this list because the rest of them did so well with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Air Wellspring in particular, like, I'm not generally valuing most of the sack outlets super highly, so it ends up being like a bad refractor for me.
Okay.
Whereas, like, there are people who are like highly prioritizing the black red sack stuff, like all the people who are drafting black red so much, and it's going to perform better for them.
That makes sense. And Stern Lesson is also surprising. I mean, especially since I saw an hour ago what you can do with it. I mean, how many Stern Lessons you had in that deck? Like four,
Five,
five? Yeah,
five.
five. Yeah. I always wanted to draft it. I never see that card. It goes pretty late, early, I think, generally.
Power
So,
stones are great.
oh yeah, no, that's definitely true. Any other surprises or thoughts on that
Um,
list?
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a pretty significant difference between like the cards on the left and the cards on the right on the screen right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
Where like the left is like, yeah, these are cards which makes sense that I'm not doing very well with them, whereas the right is like, maybe we're just getting into like, these cards are successful enough that this isn't saying that they're particularly bad for me.
Yeah,
Um,
again, there is probably like plus minus seven
I
percentage
mean,
points
like,
on
got a
those
big gap
numbers.
in win rate between like Epic Confrontation and Scrapwork Rager, and then another reasonable gap between like Prowler and Opportunist.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
and so like the Opportunist Plus is like, these are probably just fine cards.
yeah.
Um,
I wouldn't say they're bad. It's just like I found it funny that the Skyfisher Spider was there, so I included
yeah,
them on
yeah,
the list. I think that if you look at their, probably you well, you should look at, until Prowler. You should look at those cards with suspicion, and until Mind Worker, you probably there's no suspicion. They're just that didn't work for you or in the decks that you played them.
yeah. I'm giving that courier a pass though.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. I think that Combat Courier is pretty good. Again, it might have been the case of you trying to overplay those certain strategies.
Yeah.
Um. Oh, that's the bonus round.
Okay.
Your win rates by game length. And as you can see, it's like a mixture. Um, you win roughly 60-70% in most categories, but 13 turns, or so this is the number
Yeah.
of turns that you play.
Obviously, the weird things here are the like high win rate in 5 turn games and the low win rate in 13 or more, particularly given the high win rate at 12.
Yeah, but I mean, 13 or more, it actually encompasses quite a lot.
Right.
There is a bunch of games there that are like 16, 17, and you actually lost quite a lot of those. So that was something I found surprising because this is based on 30 something games, this whole category. And I
Okay.
found it, I tried to make those bins roughly a decent size. So basically, over 12, there's just
Hmm.
so few games that last over 12 that uh, the sample size for this is roughly the same as the sample size for this.
Hmm.
And finding that only 48% of the games over 13%, or over 13 turns or more, you won. I found it a bit surprising, especially knowing your reputation for trying to make the games long and grindy.
Right. Um, yeah, I also wonder what's going on with the spike at 12. Um,
That is, like
just
one game
outlier.
here, one game there. It will
Yeah, yeah.
drop back to 65. That's acceptable. I think that, yeah,
Right.
this is probably a small, the smallest of the bins. I
Right.
could have maybe included it in with these, and it would be still around 60% win rate of games 12 or longer. We can actually,
Yeah.
if you want, we can look at the data directly in the my shabby Excel sheet.
I wonder, I'm
Uh,
curious on the like 13 or more games, what portion of them are losing to Deck and myself?
that's an interesting one. I mean, that I cannot tell you. I can tell you
Right.
more how the distribution looks in more detail.
Right.
I just need to, I just need to maybe. Oh no, I deleted the bottom of it. Damn it! But you can see the sample sizes at least
Sure.
in how many games you played in each. So this is the number of games. This is the number of wins for each of those categories, basically.
Sorry, where?
Do you see the Excel
No,
sheet on the?
no, I don't.
Oh,
I
damn
think
it!
you're streaming specifically the
Okay,
the window.
okay. But
Um,
so I can tell you, it's 16 games on the 12 turns and
okay.
31 games on the 13 or more. And then you have
Okay.
roughly like around 30 games in each other category, except for the 5 games, which is just 7 games.
Okay.
That's why maybe it's so odd.
Right.
I would say
Um,
still, you are bang in the middle. Like your best performances are around 8, 9 games, which is the average for the format. That's what good players end their games at, and very often it comes because you amass so much advantage over the opponent that you
Right.
that they concede, like like you saw in the last couple of games before you get to your 40 life from the.
Right, right. Um,
And where is, so how am I going to change it now? Okay, I think that this is the sort of end, but maybe we can. I would be curious of your conclusions of the.
sure. Let's see. Broadly, interesting. Obviously, a lot of stuff I basically expected. Um, there, like some of the stuff is like when I go into 17 lands and I look at the like data for top players instead of the aggregate data. A lot of the stuff I don't know what to make of. Like the changes will be hard to account for, or like cards just seem like a lot of how I decided originally which columns in 17 lands I would value highest was just kind of by sorting by each of the columns and seeing which gave me a list that most matched my like expectations about what a list should look like. Um like comparing top game and hand win rates to top improvement when drawn, like just which of those looks more like a reasonable, tier list of strength of cards. And I think that, to some extent it's just like, well, that's really leaning into confirmation bias. But once you have done that and then you have a predictive model of which column you think is going to be best, and you go from one format to another, and then the column that you predict to give you the best list continues to give you the list that makes the most sense, that kind of, suggesting like you're doing something right, or at the very least consistent. And then, since I've gotten other data points that make me even more strongly like not trust improvement when drawn as an indicator of like strength of cards and stuff. So um this is to say that when I use this same method to look at win rates for like top players, the lists start to look more random. And I don't know if it's like small sample size or top players being like more likely to have like more divergent strategies where they're like using some particular card in a weird way or something. I don't know.
I
Um,
think that because I try to do the same exact thing by looking at the data, and I think that a lot of it is top players will be a bunch of people that have their way of playing the game, and obviously you're going to be in among that data, and of course you're going to pump the stats for prison sentences, we learned, and other cards, and there will be like Dafor or someone that plays always aggro red decks, and they will pump the particular red cards in that deck, and you will also be much more selective of that you don't play the cards outside of their plays, which will make it slightly more complicated, because part of the strength, I think, of the general data set for 17 lands is that you will see those cards in out of place situations, and that will sort of account for the win rate. While with the best players, you will mainly see them exactly where they should be, and that will sort of make smaller sample sizes for some cards, but highly elevated win rates, and make it more difficult to read. That's why I don't
right.
know. You check the archetypist thing that I did for this format.
What do you mean? I'm not
So
sure.
I do this like magic thing, mathematician magic thing, when I convert decks into numbers,
Oh
and then
yeah,
I
yeah,
plot.
yeah.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
talking about
yeah,
the plotted things with the
yeah,
yeah,
exactly,
yep,
exactly. And then you can find piece of the answers for that, and
right.
especially like when I plan to do that only for the top players, and then look through their data and see the clustering for the top players, and maybe figure out the specific builds that some people are brewing in secret. I think
Sure.
that there you can find a bit more contextual data on why certain cards are strong and which builds are promoting them, rather than having this kind of generic one when you think about the archetype as a sort of color pair and not as sub builds that are available. Because I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I got a bunch of the ideas for doing this analysis from your podcast, because you always talk about color pair, but you always try to mention that there are different builds of particular cards.
Mhm.
And that sort of brought me, well, why don't we find those builds using maths rather than using punditry? And
Sure.
it sort of works in some cases it works. In some cases you find that there is like a consensus build that you should build.
Right. Um, yeah, like I think white red, for example, in this format, I would guess is more. It's probably not particularly varied in terms of which cards are successful.
Well, how would you know? You never play it, do you?
Well, I
But
mean, the
I
way
guess
that I
you
would know
play
is
you
by
play
looking at the
against it.
data, and yeah, I certainly played against it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But like blue white, definitely, I found like three different builds that were
Yeah,
quite different from each other. Like
yeah,
ranging from flyers to ground attacking to kind of control.
yep. Um, definitely that. Um, yeah. So anyway, I think that some of this stuff was like pretty clear, and some of it was like basically a lot of the stuff that should make you go like, should I be doing this differently? Is like, should I be doing this differently, or is this just like a quirk of a small sample size, or like, like, am I wrong about like Warlords Elite being good where I'm playing it, or um, is there something else going on here? That kind of thing. Um,
It just instantly reminds me of this Principal Skinner meme. Like, am
yeah,
I wrong? No, it's the children.
yeah, it's the data. I mean, it's hard to, it's harder to go against data than it is to go against the children. Um,
Well, but I mean, to be fair, your data is pretty small,
right,
so
exactly. Yeah.
you can treat it as a children data.
That's fair. It is that. The more mature data set is harder to disagree with. Um,
Well, I mean, that was basically my only point, was to sow some doubt in your approach, and
what, you think I'm too confident?
especially the long game lose streak kind of approach. I
Right.
think is yeah, just play aggro and finish the game quickly. Come on, that's the sound like we all love, the aggro sound.
Well, I mean, except, it seems like if I'm winning a large portion of the games that go the expected length, one could argue that I'm, drafting for the kinds of games that I expect to play, and that is working correctly. Like, the games are most often that length, and I'm winning the games that are that length.
I mean,
Um,
and I think that here the format was quite particular in terms of how long will the games last. I think that in this it would look very different in Neon Dynasty, for example.
in the like, what would
And I think that in Neon Dynasty you will win many more longer games, and you would probably actually be on the back foot with the short games, because that will be against mono red or something.
sure, yes. Whereas, yes, in Neon Dynasty, I was more building. Oh, this actually makes a lot of sense. Okay, yeah. So in Neon Dynasty, I was like often constructing engines and building for inevitability. Whereas in this format, I'm very much trying to outspend my opponent on mana. Like, that's the thing that's happening with like Stalwart, is that it puts you ahead in a way that you try to like snowball into the mid game, the way that you were talking about. But like, once you get to the very long game, I'm playing like a lot of weak cards to build that early advantage, to the point where like the total amount of just like raw numbers of like, add up all the power toughness in my deck, and it's going to be lower than the power toughness in my opponent's deck, because there are just like a bunch of like 1/1 enabler type things. And so if we're playing a game that's like long enough that a mana advantage stops mattering, and we're just lining up the like raw lower right hand corner numbers on our cards, then people are gonna like beat me in a really long game. And the way that I'm trying to build an advantage is like getting an early game lead that doesn't do damage. It builds up my infrastructure and builds up my mana and lets me play stronger things on turns 3 through 6. And then that pivots into wing and that like turn 8 and 9. So I'm not getting the like turn 6 aggro kills, but I'm also not. Yeah, like I think all of that. I think the data kind of perfectly reflects an expectation for a stalwart deck.
I mean, I'm half listening and half thinking about analyzing that, because I did the analysis with before on game length and mana spending, and on game length and card drawing, but I never did an analysis on the game length and the actual number of power in your deck, which is something like, how will I control it for an unknown deck of the opponent? Damn it! I would have to look at the averages here. But yeah, I mean, it makes absolute sense. I think that there might be that you were in a perfect moment where you can't kill on turn 6, but you are quite likely to kill on turn 8, and just because you spent so much mana compared to your opponent.
Yeah, I
I
wonder
know that,
how
but
easily you
spending
could
on
get
mana is yeah.
mana spent analyses.
I did it from the replay data at some stage, and I mean, I will tag you and I will try to retweet it and tag you.
No,
But
I think I
it's
remember a thread of
yeah,
mana spent.
it's like uncanny how predictive is outspending on mana in terms of a win rate. So
Right, yeah. So, and I mean, I think that for me in this format, I'm doing a lot of outspending my opponent.
oh yeah, because you have the stalwarts, and
Right,
that's enough, and you have power stones, and that's enough,
right.
and you have ways of using them at every single step. I mean, I saw those decks; they are just like built to be able to use the Power Stone mana very rapidly. You
Right.
have those cheap unearthed creatures; they always will use Power Stone mana. Your Citadel Stalwart will be always active, so you will always play more things than the
Yeah.
blue-red deck that you were playing on stream just before we went live. I mean, you were at 11 mana, and every single turn you were able to spend that 11 mana. And
Yeah.
who cares that you didn't have much power toughness when you had like 7/1/1s that all of a sudden turned into 3/3s? So that's I guess that the kind of philosophy. But of course, if you don't draw the right cards, in some of those games you will be just beaten up by a mid-range deck because they will have bigger things at some stage.
Yeah, I think, it took, I had to think about it for a little bit, but I think I now have a pretty good uh, handle, at least in my mind, on like what's going on with that win rate curve based on
Okay,
game length.
we don't know that much about the new set yet. I mean, we see quite a lot of cards already, but what would be your prediction? How will the games look like in a format where actually you might be starting with 10 life?
Um, I don't like. So you're talking about kind of like the double strike nature of infect, but I don't think that that's really the way that toxic's gonna work because of um not being, tied to power and toughness and being just like this thing gives one of it. Um, it's like you start with 10 life, but all the creatures do appreciably less damage. Um, I think that it's more like a format where life gain isn't possible. Um, like the inexorable nature of like the toxic eventually getting you, I think, is more relevant than the explosive nature. Um, so I think it's going to be a similar situation where if you're not prioritizing it, you end up like losing the games that go to, turn 10 plus with your control decks because like people get some toxic on you and then they just like cast 3 proliferate cards before you close the game out. And so I wouldn't be surprised if um, either I end up being someone who positions myself to win with this, like, late game proliferates to end the game, or if I end up losing to that because I end up not being good enough about like closing the game and basically just like get this format's equivalent out a lot.
Yeah, I was asking actually because Wizard said that when they were describing the archetype that blue-white will be control, and I'm thinking that might be tricky to pull off when you have infect and proliferate at the same time, or well, toxic, let's call it. And I thought, maybe there will be a card that at the end of your turn, for each 2 lives you gain, remove 1 poison counter from your. That
Yeah, I
would
mean,
solve
literally
it
anything that removes
neatly.
poison counters would be significant. I think Rosewater is on record saying that like leeches is one of his most disliked cards because it like at the point where you can remove poison counters, like why does it even exist? It's just a second life total. Um and so my guess is that there won't be a way to remove them, but I might just be speaking a thing that is known to be false. I
Oh
don't
yeah,
think
no,
there's been set
no,
smoke at this point.
I have no idea. I was just thinking about how
Yeah.
control can fare in the environment will where a 1/1 threat can be quite brutal,
Right.
and you have to
Yeah. I
deal
mean,
with it.
it's. I mean, I assume either there's some kind of battle cruisery thing where like the blue deck has to like stay alive for a while, but then actually end the game, or they have to just be like, maybe they have to play counter spells to stop themselves from getting proliferated out or something.
Remains to be seen. I'm pretty sure we'll learn a lot of it from drafting archetypes quite soon. I think we can call it a day on this one. To the people from Sam's stream, because obviously I'm a little known entity. This is my podcast, Magic Numbers. I mainly talk about 17 lands data. I exclusively talk about 17 lands data. And therefore, after every episode, I thank the 17 lands team who do provide me with the data, who do provide every one of us with the data. So thanks to the guys that are involved in it. And thanks to Fake Jake Brown, who is helping me to release the podcast. And also thanks to SS and Mana Junkie, who provide music for the said podcast, which hopefully this episode will appear as, if Sam kindly sends me the video file of the stream somehow.
Sure.
We can figure it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's been an immense pleasure. I'm a big fan of your way of looking at problems. It's I don't even have to watch you play. I just like need to listen of your rationalizations of why things work, and that helped me a lot in terms of my own content, in terms of how I look at the problems, in terms of how I look at the card, in terms of how I play the game. And yeah, it's been invaluable to me. So thanks for that. And it was great pleasure to actually hopefully be helping you in some kind of
Yeah, I
thoughts
mean,
about the format,
thanks
which
for
is
coming
great.
on and for doing all the homework to put this together. And I've certainly appreciated a lot of your analysis. Throughout the time we've had access to the 17 lands data. I think both of us are, among the more extreme fans of, you know, finding ways that we can use and take advantage of this data and ways to translate it to people who are like less inclined to dig deep into it. So I definitely appreciate what you're doing, and happy to go over it with you.
Sweet. Yeah, the whole secret is be careful with the data. That's it.
Yeah.
If you're careful with the data, you'll get to the right conclusions.
Yeah.
But that requires not to be too excited about it as well. I mean, just when you find something cool, recalculate it 3 times, and then you can start being excited if that still comes out the same way.
Sure.